left off. If anybody has any questions for Tim relative to his deployment strategies and what he's demonstrated in his presentation. Any questions or further discussion on that?
Is Mr. Luke's coming back?
I don't know. Is Mr. Luke's coming back? He's your responsibility.
His stuff. That's his stuff, so.
Okay.
We need to put out 911 on.
Is there, do you want us to send out somebody to look for him?
No, I just.
Then I will. So, otherwise, if there's no further discussion on the deployment strategy or the deployment model that was prepared and presented by the EMS manager.
Do we need to clarify the 7 cutoff versus the 5 that we had done in the community?
Is that I don't think that was one of our performance measures, and I really don't know what that October contract says.
Well, no, it's not included in the
It's not.
October contract with 5, not that I remember.
So we need to make sure we write down 7 so we can.
And that's what we've agreed on, that it's 5 today and 7 in
July
the future.
1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is correct.
That's what we talked about, right, Butch?
Right.
Okay.
Now see that, and that's gonna make your job, I appreciate you showing us the lower, as we get down, and that's gonna help prevent getting into that lower category, the fewer trucks. So I think it's significant. And the other piece that with the units availability, each one of the units assigned, their availability will be tracked as well too. So all of that I think will help contribute to having sufficient vehicles to hit that upper range.
Our management team will, we constantly strive to have units available within the county. And that's what we'll do. We'll continue to manage that. And that's what we do. You even saw that. So we do that now on a daily basis to manage our system, to have as many trucks available as possible. This will assist us. This will provide a better service. The new model.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? If not, we'll move on to the comment section.
I have a comment.
Oh. Okay, Jeff wants to talk first.
Well, I'd ask the committee's indulgence for a couple of minutes to talk about the one zone concept, just for a couple of minutes, because we went back and I have an illustration, and I want to say outright.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
If maybe we do need to find Mr. Lutz.
Okay.
Your conversation, I think, would be
Yes.
very important that he heard that.
Can you hunt him down, Doc?
So let me say first that Tim, I think you did a great job, and I think that your deployment model achieves what the county is, I think, what the committee's after. So this is not at all a comment on your deployment model. So I want to be sure I'm upfront with that. And I guess we should probably wait just a minute. Mike, come back.
1 minute. 1 minute, he'll be back.
In that minute, I'd like to make a comment as the medical director that I was at the first meeting of this group, and I was very optimistic that all the parties could work together and come to a good conclusion. And now towards the end of this committee, I'm very impressed, and y'all lived up to my expectations and all worked together to come up with a plan.
Will you stand up and tell everybody who you are?
I'm Dutch Personal. I'm the EMS director for the last 8 years by Union County EMS, and I am very impressed with the work that this committee's done.
Thank you.
Okay. Since Mike's back, we wanted to wait because we felt like this is important for you to be here for this discussion.
Sure, I acknowledge.
Okay, so we start off with coming back to the committee's goal of having one response time and wanting to ensure uniform service throughout the county is I think, the appropriate goal, and I'm on board with that. The challenge I had and the questions I had, and I'll explain this map you have in front of you in just a second, was from a contractual perspective, how do we achieve that goal? Because the challenge we have in local government and county government is, okay, at the end of the day, if Mike's gone, if Tim's gone, if I'm gone, if Commissioner Holmes and Commissioner Johnson and Andrew's gone, who were all here during the development of this contract and what we know we intended to do, then what are the residents left with at the end of the day? Well, they're left with an enforceable contract and what's enforceable in the contract. So what I did is I stepped back and said, okay, if I had to enforce this contract, what does that look like? And GIS works in my shop, along with Gary, kind of came up with the numbers. So I had them look at July 2013 to June 14 calls. Okay, so this is a fiscal year look. If we said 1429 at 90% of the time, what is 90% of the calls in the county and where does that represent geographically? So when you're looking at this map, the heavy black line, which can be moved all around, I just started from working myself out from the middle and saying, if I start including census blocks, what does it look like? Conceivably and theoretically, not suggesting that EMS would ever do this, but mathematically, theoretically, you could achieve a 90% response time at the response time metric and ignore everything outside of the black lines, okay, using a single county approach. So my question for the group is, or my suggestion is, looking at this, is there a better tool to ensure that to ensure that we get what we want? I'm a firm believer in good fences make good neighbors. So if you have clearly spelled out in your contract, and now I'm talking contract, I'm not just talking goals, I'm talking contract. If in our contract we have well stated requirements and benchmarks, then I think we ensure what we're after as a committee. And what this map illustrated to me is, when I did this work with my staff, is while our goal's good and admirable and ideal, and Tim's given us a model employment-wise that he can achieve that, there's still, at the end of the day, we don't have an enforceable tool to ensure that everybody, or that EMS does what we've asked them to do. And I'm not at all suggesting you wouldn't, so don't take that as a comment that I don't think everybody in the room has the best interest of the county and the residents at hand. But what I'm referring to is that, okay, what tools, if we don't achieve, or what tools does the county have to ensure that the residents get the expectation? So what I would like to propose alternatively for consideration of the group and discussion is at least 2 zones, with the hope maybe in the future, when you staff up at a different level, recognizing it's going to take you time to staff up, 2 zones at the same response time, so that we ensure measurement, however we set those zones up, on a lower level, to ensure everybody through the county gets that, versus 1 zone where that could be manipulated at some point in the future on the response time. So I would like to just pose that question to the group. Do we think, to achieve the goal of uniform response time across the entire county, that measurement across a larger area, is that the best tool we have to ensure? Or do we think maybe using lower levels of measurement, or maybe 2 zones, is a better tool to ensure what we're trying to get to is in the contract and enforceable? If Tim does his deployment model like he says, then I don't see this as a problem. And I'm glad to see your deployment model kind of lines up with what I'm talking about. If you do your deployment and your postings like you say you will, then having that additional metric, or having that metric structured that way in the agreement, should be achievable. But this is a trust but verify, because I don't think at the end of the day we need that tool in the contract to ensure what we intended to happen happens. So with that, I'll open it up. I know this is a mathematical look at it, and I fully acknowledge that, but it's also, from a contracts perspective, what I'm hoping for is that we find the right tool to enforce what we want to have happen. So with that, I turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, for
Michael, you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've been meeting for a month. We've all put in probably at least 15 hours each into this committee. And I think early on, it was decided that there was going to be one zone. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned. We already voted, approved the plan last week, approved the performance measures, and then it seems like at the midnight hour, we're going to now switch what we previously agreed to, but not only agreed to, but really worked over the last 30 days, all in agreement. So I guess that would be my concern. Jeff, I think you have some valid points, but once again, I think Tim's presentation did show that, even at the lower 9, 7, there was good coverage. I think we were all impressed with the coverage at 96, 97, 99%. Tim was trying to do the math in his head, but it was impressive for all areas of the county. I think that's what we're after, is making sure that we have good representation. I think if you get a zone and you're talking about these small areas, the numbers are so small, I'm not sure that's really the best metric.
Well, I guess my question then is, if we're confident in your deployment model, and we have two, what I'm proposing is 2 zones to start with, maybe going to a 3rd in the future once you're fully staffed. If you're confident in your deployment model, what's the harm? Because I think from a contracting perspective, we get what we need as a committee to try to ensure that response time is uniform across the county. If you're confident in your deployment model and that you can achieve it, it really doesn't change anything except the basis of measurement to ensure that that's achieved. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I appreciate the comment on the 11th hour. Absolutely. I brought this up last week, and I've spent more time working on it since. After hearing some of the concerns voiced from the commission Monday night, we did additional work on it to kind of look at it. I'm just concerned that what we have, we all agree what we want, but if all of us aren't here any longer, what are we left with in the contract to be able to ensure what we all agreed to is enforced? And that's kind of where I'm at.
And I think where we can address this is, we are absolutely committed. You can't have a more passionate group of teammates than Union EMS. So each year, as we look at the performance standards and we look at the funding, I think this is a good question to have. I'm not sure if it's something we want to do the first year, but I hope we blow these goals away, and we want to say, hey, we can do even better than 1429, and we can move to zones 2 or 3. I just don't think it's appropriate maybe happen it the first year, but I think in future conversations, as we define those performance standards in the budgeting process, I think those are very appropriate conversations.
Mike, when you say first year, you're talking about between now and July 1st, basically, or what do you?
15 months.
15. Yeah.
15 months. And that's what I was going to say. We're talking about a 36-month contract. 15 months to roll out the plan, to get up to staff, start working. So then we got 15 months of that. And one of the recommendations that I was going to make next week and is that these things are visited every year through a process. And this would be part of the contract that would be revisited every year through a process. Hadn't came up with what that process is going to be yet. I'm still working on that in my mind. But and those goals will change. And I agree that the deployment model shows that if we did what you got right here, it would be achievable. Right now we're in 15 months. So what what I don't want to do is I don't want to sit here and we got 15 months to get this thing up and running. So basically we're talking about after that we would have 18 months of good data, roughly 18 months of good data to go back at the end of this 3-year contract and develop these zones. And I feel pretty confident that as time goes on, that's going to happen anyway with Tim and his group. They're going to work out these zones anyway to figure out how they got to do this in the interim. So, any other discussion? I mean, let's go through
I just want to make sure everyone understands why it's 1429 now in 15 months. I would be absolutely blow that goal away. And we're not gonna keep status quo. We wanna be pushed and stretched, and we wanna provide the very best service. So, I don't know what that number will be
Yeah.
15 months from now, but if it's 1429, I'll be disappointed.
I will too, and I will tell you that in my mind, that's what I'm trying to get in my mind is how we're gonna push and stretch you guys. How we're gonna push you every month to do better on, what can we change, what can we add, what can we do? And certainly through the budget process, that's gonna play a lot on that, so.
And I understand that. My concern is the tool we've chosen, in my mind, doesn't ensure that that happens, because the whole goal of having a one response time across the county was to ensure uniform service. I don't think that one does that, and if you're concerned then that you can't achieve that goal, or we're not gonna be able to achieve that goal, then I don't see how we are gonna achieve the goal of 1429 across the entire county either way. Because to me, based on this deployment model, he should be able to achieve 2 zones, and when we ramp up to 3, without any trouble at all. So what I'm hearing is you don't think you can achieve 1429 across the entire county.
Yeah, it's not.
But that's what you're saying, if you're not supportive of multiple zones,
I'm not-
because it's more of a finite measurement. And if you achieve it, and if you're achieving it across the county, you should be able to achieve it in the multiple zone approach as well.
Well, that changes the deployment model. I think it changes his deployment model if we go to multiple zones.
On this plan, is this, I guess the 2 zones, is this to try to make sure that units aren't being stacked on 74 during high call volume, during low resources? Is that what this?
What I'm suggesting is that we need to work out a zone. This isn't a zone or deployment proposal. This is just an illustration of where 90% of the calls are.
Right.
But what this tells me is that if push comes to shove, and under the performance metric that's in the contract, this is what can happen, okay? This is a hope for the best, plan for the worst scenario. I get that aspect of it, and this is mathematics, this is statistics. But at the end of the day, you're still only left with what you can enforce through the contract. So what I'm suggesting is, I would like, and I think it ensures the public gets the response times across the board that we're looking for, if we use at least 2 zones to start, and possibly 3 when we ramp up closer versus the 1. Because I think we get there, and under the model, it should be achievable either way, but I want to ensure that happens. I don't want to just leave that up to chance or to good intentions.
What are the 2 zones? I guess I'm kind of confused.
The black part is 1, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying, this is not at all zones. Take that and flip it over when we
That's a
start talking about
statistical
zones.
representation. If they meet that within that black line, then they're good. I do understand.
So that's what I'm suggesting is, do we look at zones? Do you bisect the county north to south? Or do you do rural and urban? And I try to avoid the rural and urban comparison, but how do we lay out those zones to ensure that those places that could be underserved aren't in that process?
I mean, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, this was part of what the Futures Committee should have been tasked with and brought to the table. I mean, I'm not sure who was on that committee, but if
Mr. Plowler's chomping at the bit to speak about what they did on this and that group.
well, my thing is, if we're going to change it, then it needs to be pushed back to that committee to start with a new approach. I mean, I don't see how that we can solve this in this general meeting.
But if I could speak, on the EMS part, I was chosen to be on this committee, and I appreciate I understand what you're doing. I appreciate it. But we came in here and we had concerns. There were concerns on this paper right here. And everybody in this committee voted on these. Yes, we understand this. And one of the biggest concerns, Commissioner Hamilton was even with us, or you even stated it, is that we want 1 response zone for the whole county. I built this model on this. I provided you the information that we can cover it in the 90th percentile, and you saw it. There it is. It's data. It's not me guessing. I am reluctant to even start over. What it's sounding like now is, hey, wait a minute, you've worked for 30 days, you've got good information, but we don't want that now. Now we're going to start over. We want 2 zones now. well, what's gonna happen in another 30 days? And we go, well,
Well,
we need 3 zones
but I
now.
think-
So, that's what, I think we got I demonstrated a comfortable plan. It should be with the county. It's gonna be a push for us to do that also. We can obtain it. This is what we recommended, and this is what everybody supported last Friday.
what I'm saying is, if you're not changing the plan, or don't change the plan, I think the plan that you have is correct.
Very good.
If Jeff is wanting some kind of measurement plan, then we push that back to the committee on how you would measure. I don't think the deployment model should change. I think you very well demonstrated with the way you're doing things, the model will work. If it's a contractual thing, I don't see how this large group can come to a decision. I would have hoped that since you're bringing the zone comment, that you would have the zones with you, but do you have those today?
I mean, I have it in my mind what I think, but, I mean, I would do through the center of the county, what would be essentially the yellow and the orange and red, and then the outline blocks, because I think that's where the bigger concern is addressing. And what I heard was not a uniform zone, but what I think the intent is a uniform response time across the entire county, because it's a service, not a measurement piece. And what we're aiming for is to ensure everyone gets the same level of service, and to ensure everyone gets the same level of service, you need to measure at a lower level geographically. Otherwise, there are the leave outs. So I would, and I would leave this to, like you said, a smaller group of the whole to determine exactly what the 2 should be. But I would imagine it'd be something in the neighborhood of down the middle through the colored blocks and then on the 2 edges to ensure, or if you wanted to do, east to west kind of division, there's a couple of ways to cut it. I just think to ensure that everybody gets 1429, measurement through the entire county doesn't attain that goal. I think there's a deployment model we would. I'm not suggesting we wouldn't achieve that if you did what you said. But then I go back to, there's not an enforceable component to ensure we're left with, we're gonna try hard. Then to me, this is because it's public safety, this is a do good, not a try hard. And ensuring that it's done right through the contract is a different thing than us all sitting around and saying, yeah, this is our goal, this is what we wanna have happen, we're gonna try really hard to achieve that. What I'm saying is, let's ensure that by altering the metric a little bit, not changing the deployment version, but altering the metric to ensure that that happens through the contract.
Let me ask one quick question, Tim. That you brought up a point a minute ago about one time for the whole zone. A moment ago, you had said something where we want to go toward one-time zone. Was that one-time zone or one-time response? Because there's
Response zone.
response zone, not response time.
Response time. We agreed when we first met about a month ago, the committee said, we want one response zone and encompass one response time, and that's what we did.
Okay. And I reckon the concern that I've had and I've raised, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I don't want to give the perception. I don't want it. This doesn't need to be a feel-good. Folks that live out in the New Salem and down in the Alton area and maybe up in Fairview, hey, we're going toward a 1429. Most of the folks around this table look at things from a practical. That's because it's the hands on the ground and the feet on the ground doing the work. So you're charged with looking at it from a practical standpoint. In my role, and I reckon in Jeff's and Commissioner's role, we have to look at it, unfortunately, from a perception piece of it. Because they're going to come, the citizens that don't get the response time, they're coming to me and this guy right here. Because we're the ones that are charged with making sure that the service level is provided, because we're the ones making the decisions on behalf. So my thing is, I don't want to give the perception to folks in the 10 areas that you're going to get a 29% time, just so we can feel good and make it look right on paper. And I think that's what Jeff's saying from that perspective. In addition to that, 18, 19 people around this table, personalities are going to change. People are going to come in and out. We need to have something drawn. And that's something that I've struggled with for 4 years on. It's got to be in writing on paper what we're going to do and how it's going to be done. It can't just be everybody saying, well, this is what we're going to try to do. So I have the concern of mine, am I saying let's blow this whole thing up and start over? Absolutely not. I think the deployment model is great, and then now that I've actually seen it, Johnny, he was trying to explain it to me, and I couldn't quite understand, but now I've seen it work, it makes sense to me. And I think, in the end, Jeff's concerns in the deployment model are not that far apart. I think they're pretty darn close. But what we need to do is be able to answer the question when the calls come to the county or to the elected body as to why it was 17 minutes, why it was 19 minutes at that point in time. One last quick just tidbit that I need to ask. I don't see attorneys in the room, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, contracts have to go through the attorney process. Everything we do, every motion or everything that we accept or vote on, the last words are pending legal review. I make the motion, pending legal review. So have the legal body, I'm sure on the CHS side, that's been part of their process, or at least they've got their eyes on some stuff. On the county side, have these eyes been looking at this contract as this is going forward, or have we not got to that point yet?
No, they have not, that I'm aware of.
Only in discussion. I mean, I've talked to Jeff Crook and just kind of walked him through where we're at as a committee, just so he's apprised. But there's been no work on what that attachment A would look like, because I'm assuming we're talking about attachment A to the contract. There's been no work done to prepare that. I think conceptually I've been trying to keep Jeff in the loop so that when we try to get it together, he has an understanding of what this group's been doing. But I think intentionally too, to your point, we try not to do business with the attorneys always in the room.
Well, I just don't like great ideas, because you know when an attorney gets a hold of something, they will blow something sky high and make it not
I
usable.
think the performance goals, so this committee was really tasked for two things. One is the deployment model, the second is the performance goals or the performance standards. So I think on the performance goals and standards, I think it's very well laid out and could be cut and pasted into an agreement. I think of the deployment model, we'll have to add some language that we all agree to that accurately reflects the discussion in this room. But I think we all will leave this committee today feeling comfortable on, and one consistent thought on what that deployment model looks like, which would be, 14-12 and 11-9, 14-12 maximum, 11-9 minimum. And we have to get some legal language in between those, but.
Well, that's why we targeted today, so next week they have the opportunity to do that. But may I make a statement? We came into this room, and I can tell you, Tim was a little leery of me, and he said, but the synergy in this room has been phenomenal. One thing I think is important, you can always come up with a model, and you can do it statistically or whatever, but we've gathered a group of the ultimate professionals in this county to sit and work out this model. And I think y'all have done a phenomenal job. I mean, I have to exclude myself because I'm not the expert, but y'all are. And so what we've got is the best talent in the county that's knowledgeable in the county, put together a model that'll provide the best service. And you're right, Tim, I don't know that I said I wanted one zone, but I want the same. I want our rural community to be as protected as anyone else in the county. Because I tell you what, Todd's children are just as important as the children that are right down the street. So I think y'all have done a phenomenal job. Tim, I'm very impressive amount of work you put into this. You also note that we started with a couple models, and they were that close, Tim, I think, instead of that close. And so I think we've come to a point that we can, in Jeff's concerns, we're going to have the opportunity in the budget negotiation to talk about this. We'll also have 7, 8 months of data to help make sure we're on target. And, I don't know how long, AVL is going to take a little while to get in, so, we still got some tools to get in there. But I think, to Billy's point, you don't want to blow it up and start over. Because I think we've got a model that can serve the citizens of this county. And, you know, I have a lot of respect in Mr. Lutz and CHS. And I think, you know, we put metrics in there, reporting that we can track and know where we are ongoing, and we've got expertise in the county that can work with EMS to ensure that we're on target.
I think one of the other things about this contract compared to the historical contract is there's a much stronger governance structure with Mr. T being monthly reporting. So, you know, this continues going to be an evolution. But the previous contract, there just wasn't much governance from the county perspective of EMS. And we'll be having monthly meetings. We'll be giving reports to the county commissioners. So this isn't going to be a contract that we sign and, you know, 2.5 years later, we're going to be talking about in an open forum. This will be discussed with the county on a regular basis, a monthly basis, and then obviously each year when we develop the budget process. And like I said, you know, we want to blow away that 1429, and you know, we would set the performance goal, you know, a stretch to push us a little bit. We're just not going to say, well, that's what the committee agreed to if we're blowing away a 1429 or any of the other performance goals for that matter.
Mr. Chair, what if, and there's a very high likelihood that this would never happen. What if 18 months into this thing, we realize as a group that these numbers aren't obtainable? It looked good on paper and models and everything worked, but then it just really wasn't practical when it come down to it. What happens at that point? And Mike comes to us and says, we missed it. It's just not practical with the resources that we have at this point in time.
I think you look for another model. And the reason I say that is, in the very first meeting here we had, I know Sheriff Kathy sat there, we wanted to get a one-time response. Chief Rob down at Waxhaw put a proposal together, and in that proposal excludes zones from the first meeting after the first meeting. We've had that in there, and nothing has ever been said about it. I understand your position, Jeff. I really do. I just wish you'd have brought it up a lot sooner. We've got 15 months when they're going to get fully deployed, hopefully. And then you got 18 months, and all that time they're going to be doing evaluations and running figures of meeting that. They said they could meet that, Todd. If they don't meet it, then they've broken the contract.
No, not true. They've said they'll meet it countywide, not on a micro basis. So if they achieve it, just like statistically speaking in this version, the county's left no recourse. I hear the try hard. I hear a lot of, we're going to try hard to do it, but there's no, what if they don't?
That should be written in the contract.
My understanding is
Well, that's
that
what I'm proposing.
the contract always
That's-
has a 60 or 90 day or
So 1 year.
100 day out.
It's a 1 year.
1 year.
It's
It's
1 year
a
out,
one-year
so I mean,
contract.
you do have
But
the ability to, you know, if that's not met.
I think to your question, you're saying what happens if they don't meet 1429 90%, or 90%?
Right, well,
So the recourse through what little bit I've read is that they have a 60-day period
Cure period.
to make an adjustment to get to 1429, and then after that 60 days, then they are in fact in breach.
Right.
Is that right, Mike? I mean, I haven't read it
That is
all,
correct.
but I skimmed over it, and I think that's what I remember. So that is the recourse.
But to the commissioner's question, let's say, okay, we measure it by posting, which is one of the things you suggested. All their postings on one side of the county, they're achieving it. All their postings, they're not. But on a global, the other postings on one side, they're not. But on a global one measurement scale, they are achieving the metric. It's not reachable.
Yeah.
All we have to do is say, you guys didn't achieve it, come on. You know what I'm saying? Then it becomes, it's not an issue that we can deal with through the contract. There's nothing actionable.
And I don't think that anybody disagrees that statistically, just like I said the other night, statistically, it can be done. You know, but we feel like, and I'm speaking for the group, because this is what I've been told to do. You know, the unit availability piece addresses where they're gonna be and what the distribution of trucks are gonna be. So, in our estimation, we built the system based on one response time. And by building a system based on one response time, we took into account how we would manage that. And that's why you saw the unit availability piece in the performance goals. And that's what the Future Metrics Group discussed as how to address those rule posts. Because if you saw his deployment model, then if we have 11 units available, we're 99% covered. And we're saying that they're gonna have 11 units available 90% of them.
Okay.
So that was the reason for that performance goal being in there through the Future Metrics Committee. That was one thing that they did to try to ensure that we got that whole rule set. So if they're not meeting through post-reporting every month, if they're not meeting that 1429, then you have to look at that other performance goal down there to see if they're meeting that 90 percentile availability. Now, nothing says they can't change a post. I understand all the possibilities. I do. Doc, you're about to bust over there.
Yeah.
You want to talk? I mean, you
Yes, I
cleared your
do,
throat.
because what this comes down to is patient care and quality of care. And that comes down to our quarterly quality meetings, which several parties at this table are represented at. CHS, the communications, fire, and we have that quality meeting. So I think to give some accountability to Jeff's position, we could add this to our quality meeting, which is quarterly, and report back to the commissioners these times to any kind of zone that is reasonable under this current plan that we've come up with, and give some accountability to those
And
concerns.
as part of this, each post is going to report back monthly to Curtis. So we're going to know what posts are doing what. Now, I mean, certainly we have to have something that's amenable to you guys, and I hear your concern. I heard it the other night, just like Jeff heard it. And so we need to hear from you and you as to what, some direction.
We could add them to our quality committee, the
But at the end
commissioners,
of the
or
day-
report to the commissioners.
Reporting under the contract, goals are not reachable. The standard is. And what I'm suggesting is not, I keep hearing two things. I keep hearing a time and a zone. I think the time's right. I think that 1429 is right. I'm just suggesting for a standard, let's break it so that we measure it and a little more finite, so we ensure the folks throughout the county in the standard get the care we want them to get. Because I want everybody in the county, which is what I heard, to get the same time. So I won't belabor the point. I'm done with it. I wanted to
Okay.
come back to that.
What if we, and I think I heard Commissioner Johnson pretty clear, and I definitely heard Chairman Akins the other night pretty clear. What if we take a look at this, and I'm by no means am I in favor of us doing anything different on our deployment model. I think it looks fantastic. But in order for us to get a performance measure or a service level approved through our commissioners, and what I'm hearing from them is they want that level of accountability. I think that probably the best thing for us to do is just take another look at it and see if not changing the deployment model, but see how we can make zones work in Tim's deployment model and have a recommendation. I'm at the pleasure of this group. I'm going to do what y'all tell me to do. So let's hear from you.
So my earlier recommendation is push this back to the Futures Committee. And Jeff, I think it's very incumbent upon you to bring to the table exactly what you're talking about, specifically, you know, the different models that you're thinking about, so that the Futures Committee can go through that. I do agree that the deployed model should not change, and I think that your model should, for the statistical analysis, should go along with what
Should fit that.
he has. And I think that if anything, there should be a recommendation from that subcommittee, the future subcommittee, which presents one of the statistical models for tracking that would come out of it. And then secondly, I think there should be a couple of options as well. You know, I'm trying to play the fence here because I understand where the county's coming from, and I understand where Mr. Lutz is coming from as well. I mean, you know, ultimately, you guys have to come to the agreement, but if we come to the table with just one agreed upon model and no options, then I could see us being in a quick stalemate out of the gate. So that would be, and I'll be glad to put that in formal motion if it's needed to push that back to that committee. And you know, I'm not sure where we stand within our time frame.
1 week.
So,
1 week.
well,
Well, actually, I think it has to go out next Wednesday or Thursday, isn't it?
Well,
A recommendation.
It was listed
17th.
next Saturday, but we can't do Saturday.
17th. Monday,
17th is the vote.
Yeah, Monday, 17th.
You know, one of the things that we can do, one, may I make a couple of recommendations? I think our professionals here have recommended the one zone is what's been come up with today. We could go with that and then have plans to modify that in the budget time frame when we, plus we'd have a little historical data. I know from Tim's standpoint, I used to be a service manager as well, and I had to have people posted to respond to computers that go down. And so, you know, dividing it up, I know it'll have an impact. So we need to study that. The other option is, I have to look to my peers, that, you know, they wanted to vote on it 17th. I've had one of the commissioners tell me that, you know, maybe we need to move that back to give time to do that. But to throw this change on this group within 1 week, I don't think is reasonable.
I agree.
And, you know, if we need to ask the commission to say, you know, let's look at this and have it ready by middle of December. If we're going to have to go back and reinvent the wheel somewhat for this, then we need to know what to proceed with.
I mean, November 30th. I mean, you can pick a day anytime in there. From the fact, I know you're getting around Thanksgiving, but
Can I throw out a point here that maybe we can all live with? What if we went back and we amended the proposed performance standard to say a single countywide response zone with a total time of no more than 14 minutes and 29 seconds countywide, to say that by July 1 of 2015, we will have determined if there needs to be multiple zones, or we will work through the deployment model to say more than one zone.
And let me, I mean, just me thinking, you know, I understand what Jeff's looking at, you know, as far as what does the county have. You gotta understand what we've done in here. We haven't done this before. We haven't been doing this model. This is gonna be this is a future model that we're talking about. That's what we constructed. The data and the mapping and the data says we can do that. We built it on 1429, one response zone. But on my part, on my end, at the 12th hour here, you want to change it over to us and go, well, yeah, you look like you can do it. Well, you say you can do it, but now we want you to do it in 2 zones at the same time. Well, see, now you're throwing, you know, instead of putting it, you know, now you're putting out something that I may not be able to obtain. You know, this is a future model that we're looking at. So you got to give us time to get it deployed. We're talking about July of 2015. That's what is that, about 7 months, 8 months now?
We don't even have AVL working.
Yeah, we don't have any of this stuff.
I mean, it's just not reasonable.
You know, and so what you're asking us, all of a sudden, you're gonna throw another zone on us? That we got to measure in 2 zones that we built this. This is something future. In 15 months, 18 months, we may have to come back to the drawing board and go, what the data has shown, yes, it will, but will it actually work? We gotta work and see.
Let me ask a quick question. Countywide, what's the response time now?
Have to look in the toolkit. It's,
Somewhere.
but I mean, this is where I'm coming from. I understand you guys are looking on the county side, now I'm looking on the EMS side and say, you're gonna throw two zones on me now, and we hadn't even got up and running.
I think it is unfair to you, Tim, that this is coming in at the last minute. I will say, not a knock on absolutely anyone in here, one time and one zone somewhere got meshed together and they're not the same. And I think to look at a county as diverse as Union County, comparing Weddington to Alton and treating it the same zone is just not, and I wasn't at the meetings early on, so I wasn't the liaison and I didn't have an opportunity to participate in that. That should have been done early on. One zone should not have even been considered early on, in my opinion. I agree it's late in the game to be changing that. I would like to know if, Don, if you've got that figure somewhere, I'd like to know that the countywide response time now versus the countywide response time with what this deployment model is going to go to, and compare the differences, since we're going to be looking at it as countywide response time anyway.
So I think Chief Life was getting ready to make a recommendation. Perhaps one of the things we could do to appease both parties, both perspectives, is rather than July 2015, we could say we would evaluate it by July 2016, which would then give us the 15 months, gets us to have ABL up and going, gets us to really, hire the staff and then evaluate it. And like I said, I know hope is not a strategy, but my expectation is that we, meet this and really exceed it. That will give us time to get ABL, get the resources. But if you have a goal, you've got to have the resources to hit the goal. And quite honestly, between now and July, we won't have all the resources. So I think July 2016, I think it would be fair to say we'll evaluate multiple zones, whether that's 2 or 3 or whatever, but it's just not feasible to say July 2015 when we don't have the resources, both within EMS and at the county level with CCOM.
The zone, when you talk about zones versus the response time, is the zone just what, and I'm trying to put it into terms that we would use in the CAD system. You're talking about a reporting zone. You want to split the county up into reporting zones, so you can look at a zone by zone reporting and see how they're doing in each area.
Right, and I'm suggesting we set the standard at 1429. I'm not suggesting we change the times. I'm saying to ensure that everyone in the county, because I'm hearing Tim say, and I hope that if I'm wrong, somebody will correct me, which I believe they will. So what I'm hearing Tim say is that countywide he can achieve it. However, with one time, one zone, he couldn't achieve that same if you split the county in any way. So there are necessarily then, by that statement, people that are not going to get or are not going to be assured of at the 90th percentile response time. And that's exactly what I'm trying to watch out for by suggesting we have two measurement zones, same response time uniform across the county, but 2 standards to say you're going to meet it in zone 1 and zone 2, or in the future maybe zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, depending on how it works out. But to ensure that everybody in all the county gets that same time, not just 90% of the calls if it's all one part.
I don't think Tim's saying that. I think think in his defense, he doesn't understand what the zones are, so how can he commit to achieving it in 1 or 2? It may be that you dissect, and I say you because you brought it up, you may dissect the county in such a way that he can do it. with the deployment model that we have today. I think that, again, this is the problem we have right now, is that there's a recommendation out there to split into zones without anything to say, yes, our deployment model that we came up with today meets that. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I understand the need to split statistics to better represent. But until you, it's just like when I was asking the question last week, with how are you going to implement it when you get down to 5, to the 7, 5, 3? I need to understand that from your perspective, because again, it may be that the way we're posting today, he meets everything at 99.99%. Maybe it goes down to 82%. I don't know. But again, that's because I don't understand what your zones are going to be. So what we need to do is take those measurements. I think from the commission's perspective, I don't understand, maybe this is my ignorance, why you guys can't move forward with the agreement and then have the, as with any legal agreement, you revisit this specific reporting standard within the next month or something to give the committee time to review how your zones, what's defined, would mesh up against what you as the Futures Committee have determined as the deployment model. Why do they have to be connected?
And I think, and actually, I would build on that suggestion, because I'm not suggesting we choose the zones in such a way that it makes it impossible to achieve. I'm suggesting that we get the right folks, including EMS, to say, okay, here's our deployment model. If that deployment model is the case, how's the best to measure it in 2 zones to ensure that we get the measurement and the metric we need against the deployment model that's been proposed. And I think that's kind of what we're saying, is why can we not come back and agree that we're going to have 2, but establish what those are?
Right, but now the problem we have looming in our face is this mountain is in front of us, and we don't have much time to pull the yoke back on this plane to gain altitude unless we get some relief from you guys.
I guess to that point, I think we would have a better opportunity to set better goals. Once we're fully implemented, we have ABL, we have all the resources, because right now, we're still gonna be projecting, while, a year from now, we're gonna have data, we're gonna have hopefully ABL working, we're gonna have the resources, and I think we can set a lot better goals. I think anything that we do in the next 30 days, the next 6 months even, is just gonna be a projection. That's why I think we need to wait till we have all the resources, we have ABL, and then come back and address this issue. I don't think we have any concerns addressing this issue in the future, but we have to have the resources so we can actually project what's reasonable. And quite honestly, if you do it now, I think you're going to have times that are probably not, as Commissioner Helms likes to say, stretches as much. But if you give us data, you get everything working, then we can really look at some goals that stretch us a little bit more. Because right now, it's just going to be a projection. And
Chip, let me ask.
It's a nice word for a guesstimate.
Is there anything in the contract now that alleviates or responds to goals that's in the contract currently?
No, my understanding is the one thing in the contract that's a breachable offense.
He's talking about the current contract.
Under the current contract?
Yes.
No, because it's the
Okay.
anticipation of the current contract is we put in this attachment A.
Right.
And that's why, and I hate to be a stick on this, but that's why I'm saying the only thing breachable in the attachment A at this point is that response time metric. The rest of the goals are goals, they don't hold up to a breachable offense. So if Mike, and they're not achieving that response time, or they're not achieving the deployment of the 14 availability, then all we're gonna be able to do is say, it's reported and public shame is not a legal tool. I mean, I understand, Mike, you guys wanna do it, but you know what I'm saying, because you deal with contracts. That is not, it's not a tool we can use to point to CMS or EMS and say, you guys aren't holding up your contract. They're trying, and under goals, that works for trying, but not having the tools to say you're not doing what you need to be doing. And that's my point.
Can I ask a question? Today, under today's model, trucks on the road right now as we speak, are we meeting the goal that we're trying to achieve in the new contract of 14 minutes and 29 seconds?
Based on the information that we've
Yes.
For the last month, last from 7/1 through 8/31,
We're
yes.
close, yes, yes.
Was that including shoot times? Because when we first started, we weren't including
That's
shoot
what the
times.
ABL turned on.
That's with AVL turned on.
Yeah, they're doing 1362.
We're-
But that's only 1 month.
We're improving weekly, monthly. We're continuing to improve, yeah.
And this deployment model increases the resources, so that will only continue to improve.
And I reckon the point to that is the 1429 is being achieved today. So as a county-wide number, and I just have this map in front of me, I think this map is even showing that it's being achieved because the 90% at 1429 on a county-wide basis is actually not that stringent. If we're achieving it today under current resources at 11 and 9, or the numbers that y'all were talking earlier, that's being achieved today. So from a practical standpoint, they're not gonna, CHS won't do it, they're gonna do the best they can do, and they'll operate under whatever deployment model that's approved. But theoretically, nothing really has to change to achieve the goal that's already being achieved anyways.
Except that sometimes we're down to 5 minutes of zero trips.
But you're achieving 90%, 1429.
Unless you call during those 5 minutes.
But you're achieving 1429 as a whole on an average, 90% of the time. Which is my concern, and you are validating the concerns that get raised to me. I live out in an outer area, or I'm worried about the one time because my husband's a 82-year-old severe diabetic, or that's the kind of stuff that we have to answer to.
And that's why this model will increase that level of service to those people.
But contractually, it doesn't.
Can I, and it's just as my own interest. Is there any other public service or public safety entity in this county that you guys contract with, other than us? That's
Every
go
fire-
up under these type of benchmarks,
Every fire
Every
department.
fire department we contract in the county.
and they meet the criteria as this.
They have their board of directors that they answer to. We are
I'm
simply
just
a funding.
asking.
Johnny runs his department the way he wants to run his department. I don't tell him what to do. He doesn't, if I tried to, he'd tell me where to stick it, and I respect that. All we are is a funding and a tax levying authority for him.
Okay.
Don could address this, but I know that, I don't think there's a contract saying if you don't meet X number of minutes or X number of time, that you don't get this money that we allocate. That's not in the contract. So Don could allude to that, I think.
No, every department in the county is its own entity, and we theoretically contract with the county, but each department has its own board of directors, which the chief answers to. So, I mean, they set what criteria they want for that area.
But the state also looks at your no-shows and all that.
Oh, yeah, the state, we got oversight, we got oversight that goes all the way to the White House.
They could
I'm just
lose-
asking, I just asked a question.
I think, let's try to get off this or out of this
Yeah.
rut. And how we do that is, we have a couple options on the table. We can make an attempt to look at the deployment model versus zones to see how that plays out. I'm not sure that we can do that in a week. We have the option of waiting till July. And I don't have any idea how long it takes to get AVL online or any of those things. We have the options of making some recommendations toward revisiting this, later on, or I serve at the pleasure of this board. I'm gonna present whatever the desire of this group is. So,
Do you need a motion?
yeah, we gotta get out of this rut, so.
I move that the Future Metrics Committee reconvene next week, Monday preferably, or as soon as time we can notify the meeting,
Maybe Tuesday.
maybe Tuesday, with the goal of determining the appropriateness of 2 zones against the deployment model we have to develop an alternate recommendation for the committee's consideration.
Sorry, say the last part again?
To develop an alternative, a 2-zone alternative for the committee's consideration. And then the group, that this committee meet again, maybe Thursday of next week to discuss that as a full group.
Can I add one friendly adjustment to your, that, you know, one of the reasons that it's been difficult to achieve anything is the short time frame we've been given. I'd say that we go through that process. And I know it's been a burden on everybody to sit in here 3 to 4 hours a day, 3 days a week.
7 times a week. 7 times.
So, well, and that's true. So I ask that we have until December 15th to come up with a solid multi-strand.
Can I ask how that works, because the commission as a whole directed the deadline. You're not in session again until the 17th. Are you going to make a request to the commission to?
Yes, I'll make a request, and I ask
Okay.
Commissioner Johnson to sit here because I think, you know, to force us into a short time frame again, we can have similar. We could be at the same point next time.
I would hope not.
I understand. I'm just saying. So if as important as this is, give us time to do it. I know there's going to be a new board, but you know there's still 5 commissioners that are looking out for the best interests of the county.
There's a very strong opinion based on fellow board members to have this achieved before this new board is seated. Because this issue's been, how many extensions have we had in the last 4 years?
7.
2 years worth.
Too many.
I mean,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I look at Greg and Tim, and I'm sorry, I don't know the gentleman's name to my left,
Joey.
but these guys need stability.
Absolutely.
Having to deal with extension after extension after extension and not knowing what's coming which direction, it's unfair to these guys and gals that are actually the boots on the ground to have to constantly come back with revisions and extensions. And so that's why there's a very strong interest, since a lot of this has happened over the last 2-3 years, that the current board finalize it and let's get going.
Let me ask this question. If this group makes a recommendation on Monday night that we have 1429 countywide with 1 reporting zone, then what alternatives is the current board going to look at?
I will tell you that I can't speak for the board. I can speak for myself. And again, there's some legalities with contract extensions that are out there. I will make myself available for any special meeting to hold any vote between now and November 30th, to give this board or this committee any additional time that they need. Again, pending legalities and pending contract extensions, to give this committee any time that they need to address any of the concerns that fellow committee members have brought up.
This is not a contract extension. I mean, you've got a 3-year contract. What this is looking at the metrics. To have the metrics in is what we've got to do. And so, you know, we've got to do it right. And
So I reckon if the 17th is too quick is what I'm saying. I can't speak on behalf of the board and extend it, but the board can extend it. And I would say that you've got 1 out of 5 that would be willing to give it until November the 30th. I don't know what day of the week that is, but that I don't mind leaving it open.
Okay?
Hey, I think the question we should ask, can he come up to work together to come up with a 2-zone deal in that length of time? If he can't.
Then it doesn't matter, absolutely.
Doesn't make any difference.
That's true. That's true.
You know, we give our all for those for 6 weeks or more.
Sure.
But we've been doing this since 2008. You know, and it's like it's another. Here's another piece of the puzzle we want you to solve. Here's another piece. You know, and so my thing is what we can offer is that we went with the committee's recommendations. We constructed a model. We constructed and we put in place performance goals. We put in place a response time, and we put it in place with one zone. We also looked at, as far as crew member comforts, the other areas that this committee looked at, other than now the financial part or the contractual part of it that we looked at. To say that I can spend another month or so looking at this, I don't see it. My thing is I give you all I can give you right now. This is a projection. This is a projected model. We've never done it before. We've got to get into it. We've got to make sure we've got to make sure all this is working before we can say. So for me to go over and say, well, yeah, we're going to give it, you can have 2, 3, or 4 zones, I can't do that.
And that's the whole issue. I think it would be premature to set any type of benchmark until we have the ABL, we have the resources. We're open to looking at different zones, and I think there's a motion on the table. I'd be willing to, have another motion that we would continue to support the recommendations of this committee and amend the one that we would look at evaluating adding another zone in the fourth quarter of 2015. That's the evaluations, not the implementation.
Okay, let's continue the discussion on the motion on the floor before we get too off base here on the motions. Do what? No. Do we have a second to say it again? Your motion.
Essentially convening the Future Metrics Committee back to determine 2 zones and reconvene this committee to discuss that recommendation to move forward to determine further consideration of this committee. What I'm saying is develop an alternative to the single response time measurement zone. I'm not suggesting we change the response time. I'm suggesting we look at the measurement zones to establish 2 measurement zones.
Jim, are you interjecting a date to do this, or a date to have
I'm
it
suggesting
done
as soon as possible, which I think Johnny's saying is Tuesday, and this committee would reconvene on Thursday to discuss that.
Let's get a second before we get into too much discussion.
That's my
Can we get a second on the motion so we can discuss it on the floor?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the motion's on the floor. Now we can have discussion on this motion.
Chairman, I have a question.
Question or discussion?
Under discussion. On the current deployment model, it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it not stated that there would be some reporting by posting position?
Yes.
So that's technically a reporting area.
Yes.
And was there not some discussion that if they didn't meet the 1429 in that posting area, that there would be a report sent to Curtis stating why they didn't meet the 1429 in that?
Yes, with corrective action within the 60-day period.
So, in other words, I think by that standard, we already have a reporting area zone established by using those posting positions. So why do we have to go back to the subcommittee to look at 2 separate zones when we already have reporting zones in place based on the posting position map?
So you're suggesting the standard by posting?
I'm just saying, if we have a way to already measure it and look at it, and we've already been determined that EMS is going to report back if they miss the 1429 goal in that section, we have to have a certain amount of time to evaluate the data under the new standards that this committee has recommended under the 1429 county-wide program. And at this point, that was, from what I understand,
That's correct.
The way that the committee has asked for that report to come back. So, understanding that there has to be something in a contract eventually to hold them to the standard, but I think it would be premature to hold them to a standard that hasn't been implemented, developed, and tested.
Okay, I guess I have one question, and that's for you. Where do you stand on this? Are you for the 1 zone? Are you for going back right now and taking a look at the 2 zones? And I don't want any further motions. I'm just asking that question.
I think that right now, until we get ABL, until we get the resources, I think it's the one zone. Once again, we're more than willing to look at 2 zones, but I think that you're probably a year away from really evaluating that. But at this point in time, Tim just said he can't do it in the next week. He can't even humanly do it. And I think it's just premature because we don't really know what the number's gonna look like. We're gonna be setting goals that we don't even know if those are the right goals.
And I think maybe I need to clarify what I said. It's not a response zone, it should be a reporting zone. Because that's really what we're talking about. It's not really the response zone, it's the reporting zone. So, it's my understanding then we're kind of in an impasse. You know, CHS is saying they're not willing to look at multiple zones right now, and the county commissioners are saying we want to look at multiple zones right now, so where does that leave us?
I think you called the question.
Okay, so, any more discussion on it?
I mean, Tim, just, if the goal, if the motion is to do this next week, Tim can't do that. So it's an unreasonable expectation.
Any further discussion?
Mike, let me ask you a question, and I understand what you're saying because I know it's a lot of work. How long would it take?
He said fourth quarter of next year.
I don't know. I mean, we could do the work before fourth quarter. I'm just saying, I think to really set goals, if we're gonna go in that level of detail, why don't we get all the resources that we need to do the job? And I think they're gonna be much stronger goals. I think, honestly, for the county, for a contract perspective, I think it's gonna be better for the county because you're gonna have better data to say, you guys are doing this in these zones. We have ABL, we have the resources. Back to Rosanova's point, we're only going to continue to get better. If we set a goal next week, it's not going to be as strong as if we wait a year and get all the resources implemented.
Could you do it by budget cycle?
I mean, we could do it, but once.
Of course, we're going to have to do it every
We're not going to have ABL, we're not going to
What
have.
I'm hearing you say though is, give me all the resources, then I'll tell you what my response time's gonna be. Is that,
I mean,
versus us
obviously-
saying, here's the service level we wanna provide to the residents. What standards, metrics, and resources do we have to put in place to ensure that response time? I think it's a chicken and egg, and I'm hearing from your perspective is, give us all the resources, give us all the time, and we'll tell you what a reasonable response time is gonna be.
Well, I have concerns that the ABL is not working to its full capability today. And I think for us to really, I think everyone would agree, you know, we're excited about moving together, working together on getting that going. It's a better partnership. I'm just thinking we can set better goals once we really understand what are the true limitations of the ABL in the future and just not what. Because what I'm gonna have to do if I set goals now, I'm gonna have to base it on the limitations of ABL right now. Because there's no guarantee as a contractor that I'm gonna enter into a contract that's saying, well, we're gonna do this, or we can do this. I have to base it off where we are today. And that's my whole issue. I think we can produce a better response time goal if we get the resources up and going.
And with all due respect, Mike, there's a goal on the table now. So that number, a goal has been set without knowing resources.
And we feel comfortable with that.
My understanding of the contract is that that'll be revisited at budget time.
June, well, late in the budget. Okay, any further discussion? If not, restate your motion so we know exactly what we're voting on.
Okay. The motion was to convene the Future Metrics Committee as soon Tuesday, then be the earliest date, to develop a two measurement zone, not to change the response time, but 2 measurement zones to use the standard, and then bring that proposal back to this committee on Thursday for consideration by the whole.
Thursday. Okay.
Well, as soon as that,
Tuesday's a holiday, so it'd have to be Wednesday, right?
Wednesday, and then as soon as
Wednesday would be
they're
yours.
following after, then we can convene the group as a whole. I
Okay.
don't know when that could happen, but.
All right, all those in favor of sending this back to the Future Metrics Committee, raise your right hand, say aye. All those opposed, like sign. Okay. So right now, we're gonna stand on this, what that said. Now, let's entertain the other motions if we're flying around early. I still think we have to set some kind of timeline to do this. I do agree that it needs to be done, but let's do that relative to, now you can make a motion.
Well, I guess my recommendation would be to continue to support the performance goals response time that was approved at last week's meeting, and add to the response time that in the fourth quarter of 2015, we would evaluate adding additional response zones.
Question on evaluation.
You need a second before we start
Yeah.
discussing.
Sorry. Can we get a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Gary. Okay. And I guess, maybe a friendly amendment to that would be, that we implement, not response zone, but reporting zone.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because we don't want to talk about responses because that's 10. That's, response zones are different. Talk about reporting zones, so that we look at implementing additional reporting zones. And we'll know what that is by the fourth quarter next year. Is that acceptable?
So you would implement it by, are we going to give a date?
Fourth quarter, we'll look at implementing those.
Why don't we just say January 1st, 2016?
Okay.
Would that be acceptable too?
I think so.
And Chief, I thought you were getting ready to say
I
something.
was, but I need to refrain some.
How hard that was.
Please continue.
But I think that's more reasonable if we have that time frame. We got our data working toward a new system, we've got the resources up. Now, we have everything we need to look at those reporting zones.
So the understanding would be until that time, there would still be the accountability for the 14 minutes, 29 seconds.
With a monthly reporting of each individual post, so that we'll understand where we are. I mean, that's just collecting the data between now and then.
I think it's important to note that 1429 is what we're dealing with, the resources right now. Now, Mike and I have had conversations in the past. It's kind of hard to hire staff and do that when you don't have a contract. If you have a contract now, that you can do that. So I think that seeing how AVL's made improvement, 12-hour shifts have made improvement, we can fully anticipate that this 1429 is going to decrease with when they have the resources, so but we'll have the data to make sure that what we do set as our goals are factual and realistic for achieving and measurable. So we've come from a contract that says go and do good, and that's basically all we've had. It's been extended and extended. Now we've got it here that we put together. Like I said, I highly admire, respect the professionals we have in this room, and I don't think that can be ignored. So, and that's, from the hospital, fire, EMS, and the county. We've provided something that is manageable today, and unfortunately, this type of model can't be flipped or switched and it's done. So we've got to be realistic, and what we're doing is we're enhancing the service level to our citizens throughout the county, and that's the important thing. Is that a fair statement, Mike?
Very much so.
Okay,
Another thing we haven't looked at, I hope that the county commission could nix all of this, what we're saying.
yeah.
They could not say, not bound to it. I don't know how many y'all have, but I've got about 30 plus, 30-something hours in this meeting. I agree with Richard, what he said, that we do have some verification in the goals that's been put in there, whereas there isn't any now. I do think you gotta have a starting place somewhere, and come up at the last minute and say, let's change that starting place. I think it's unfair for EMS. I do think we could probably have some more stringent goals in there now than we have now. But I think if you gotta start and go somewhere and then add those goals down the road, you gotta have trust with each other. The county, you gotta trust EMS and so forth. And if you don't have the trust, we're wasting our time in here. I believe what Mike said, they're gonna try to bust that out of the line. Now, he says he busted, then, that's great. That's great. That's great that he do that. But let's give a chance. Let's have a beginning somewhere.
We like a challenge.
Okay, are there any further discussion on the motion on the floor? If not,
So can we have the motion repeat, please?
yes. The motion is to, now make sure I'm right. The motion on the floor is to reevaluate the performance standard and include multiple reporting zones January 1, 2016. Is that correct? That's the motion on the floor.
Yes. I think the motion was to proceed with the model and the performance goals that we had
Currently.
agreed upon at last week's meeting, with the added into that we will look at the performance standards and by January of 2016 and adding additional reporting zones.
That was the amendment. The amendment was
Yes.
so you want to restate it or you want me to? You restate your part and I'll restate mine.
My motion would be to, once again, make sure everyone understands that we are accepting what was previously approved, both the response time as well as the performance goals, but amend the response time goal with the understanding that we would evaluate and implement by January 1st, 2016, multiple zones.
I'd like to add an amendment to that motion. Well, has it been seconded? It's been seconded.
Yes.
I'd like to amend that motion by adding that new goals be looked at to be set for January 2016.
Yeah, and that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's already got that in there.
Okay, that's
Yes.
fine, but I
The
mean,
new goals will come along with the new zones.
exactly. I mean, I wanted that to make sure that's in there, that we add that in there.
Are there any further discussion on that motion on the floor? Mr. Luke's motion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
One. Any other comments?
You have amendments, what,
Sir?
was there not an amendment associated with that, or not?
No, Butch withdrew
No.
because it was already in
It was in
there. He added that. Any other comments for the good of the group? This is actually the comment section. Jeff brought up a comment. Are there any more comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say to the full committee, I think we've worked very, very hard. I think there's been a lot of congeniality on everybody's part. I haven't seen anybody pull each other's hair out. And it's been a pleasure to work on the committee. And but you gotta have trust. Trust, just like in a marriage. You got one pulling against the other, it's not gonna work. And I think there has to be a beginning and then an evaluation. And I think we put a deployment model in that will do this. And if we just give it a little time and a little trust, and, let's see if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, then go back to drawing board.
Yeah, I think we've committed to do that.
It's definitely an enhancement over historical contract for EMS, so all citizens of Union County will benefit from this.
I have one thing that I want to talk about is, I think we should probably try to get back together next Friday prior to the Board of Commissioners meeting on Monday. And if for nothing else, I will show my presentation that I'm going to present to them, make sure everybody's in agreement, because my responsibility is to present to the commissioners what this group tells me to. So I want to make sure that I got everybody's input and understanding as to what we're presenting. Okay? If nothing else, I'll accept that motion that we all move forward. So, second. Thank you.